Hello, this is Adam with Dream-Made Productions. This video is made possible by the very kind donations of viewers like you. Thank you. If you are in a position to help this channel improve quality and grow, please visit my Patreon page at www.patreon.com/DreamMadeProductions, linked below.
It is the 31st century, and mankind is once again at war. The battlefields of the future are dominated by huge robotic war machines known as battle mechs.
Hello, and welcome back to The Arsenal, a series where we look at the weapons, equipment, and technology of the BattleTech universe. Today, we revisit a topic covered not long ago, but from a different angle. On the battlefield, speed can be life. The option of mobility is almost always an asset. And while the M.A.S.C's legs offered it an advantage over its tracked, wheeled, and hovercraft foes, it was not the end-all be-all. Today, we look at some of the other solutions to speeding up the battle mech. Today, we talk about the Supercharger, M.A.S.C, and triple-strength Myomer. From the time man first deviated away from horse-powered vehicles, humanity has relied on an engine to power our mobility. It did not take long for people to begin looking for ways to push the limits on what that engine could technologically do. One big way of doing so was to, let's go with bend the safety rules of the machine in question, a trend that would continue centuries later with the battle mech. The M.A.S.C's legs gave the battle mech a tremendous advantage over conventional ground forces. Its ability to step up hills, step around obstacles, and climb up some cliffs was and still is the key to a battle mech's superior mobility. The invention of the jump jet in 2471 gave the battle mech even more mobility. Allowing a mech to go airborne for a short time granted it the capacity to leap over obstacles like small buildings or somewhat narrow rivers. Still, there was one place the conventional combat vehicle could outmatch the battle mech: the spacious open plains. The heavily armored legs of the M.A.S.C were just not built for speed. A good tracked vehicle on the open plains could run rings around the M.A.S.C, to say nothing of a wheeled vehicle on pavement. Almost at once, ways were tried to improve a battle mech's sprint speed. What was tried in what order is kind of up for grabs. When you are looking for records over 600 years old, well, exactly what took place in what order kind of gets murky, especially when we are talking about things being researched at the same time. I like to think the first attempt was to paint the thing red. After all, I've been told that red just makes it go fasta. Well, in all seriousness, the first real attempt came to be, oddly enough, the same year as the jump jet. Up until now, all battle mechs had a few things in common. In 2471, the Free Worlds League introduced the Hector battle mech. To our modern eye, we see nothing remarkable about this mech. But when we compare it to those that came before, something starts to stick out. The reverse joint legs of the Hector was the first attempt to increase a mech's speed. The theory was that the reverse joint leg assists animals in their sprint speed. The reverse joint leg has many advantages over the more human-style leg, or whatever the hell this is. On battle mechs, the increase in efficiency does exist, but, well, results are lackluster to say the least. Reverse joint legs will get you a tiny fraction more speed, but they are also slightly harder to control on difficult ground. The Hector's legs were not the speed boost evolution they were meant to be. The Hector's other bad design choices led to the mech being not received well. So why do we still see them on the latest battle mechs? Well, several reasons. One is simple aesthetics. Modern gyros are better attuned for the difference in human balance and reverse joint balance. It's almost unrecognizable. Perhaps the biggest, though, is that a reverse joint leg is slightly more efficient when moving at speed. An efficient design is a lower maintenance design. Mechs designed to move at high speed for long periods of time, especially budget mechs, generally have reverse joint legs. They become a little more rare as you move up the weight classes. Except in clan mechs. The clanners do tend to run more. What came next is where the murkiness begins. I believe the mech or fusion supercharger came next. The technology is simpler and had been around in some form or fashion since pre-spaceflight. I guess the next question is, what is a supercharger? Well, for the answer to that, we have to go all the way back to land-based Earth. Internal combustion engines, while very different today, fundamentally are the same basic idea as they were at the dawn of the 20th century. Air and fuel are channeled into an engine, ignited, and the miniature explosion pushes something around that provides mechanical power. One way to get such an engine to provide more power, and thus more speed, is to pump additional air into the engine. Adding an air pump forces more air into the combustion chamber, making the explosion more powerful, providing more energy. Here is where the safety issues begin. Create too much power and you will break something. But balance the air just right and you get even more power and speed. Pumping that air into the engine requires an air pump and a power source. A supercharger uses the engine to power the air pump. In ancient pre-spaceflight times, this was done by connecting the air pump to the engine with a belt. Another way is to use the escaping gas from the engine to power the air pump. This was called a turbocharger. Why the difference? Well, like anything else, it's because eggheads got together and started debating. The engine has to power the pump. That's less efficient than having the, quote, free exhaust gas powered. The turbocharger is more complicated because it requires more design changes and has more failure points. Blah, blah, back and forth. Then, if that were not bad enough, certain really high-performance engines had both supercharger and turbocharger systems combined into a turbo supercharger. Take this B-17 bomber engine design, for example. Now, I do feel it is important at this point to mention a major difference. In the 31st century, these superchargers and turbochargers are still around. However, they are not the superchargers you will find on combat vehicles. These ancient air pump superchargers are today referred to as civilian superchargers. Virtually no combat vehicles mount such devices. Combat superchargers, or going forward just superchargers, work on a different principle. I'm sure we will get to that in due time. Why am I mentioning all this? Well, it will come back later. So, where was I? Okay, yes, the fusion supercharger. Finding options limited when trying to increase the land speed of a battle mech, the age-old way of pushing an engine past its normal limits returned. Clearly, there are differences between a piston-driven ICE engine and a miniaturized tokamak fusion reactor, but you would be surprised how basic concepts carry over. A fusion supercharger performs 3 functions simultaneously. First, the supercharger changes some safety settings within the fusion engine software. Now, this sounds dangerous and, well, It is. These changes basically allow a fusion engine to cycle faster and forces the fusion core to accept reactants at a faster rate. Next, the supercharger injects additional hydrogen isotope, normally protium, into the fusion core. The combined effect is to temporarily increase the engine's rating. When the system is active and working properly, the engine rating is temporarily increased, resulting in a mech being able to move at up to double its base land speed. That is quite the increase. So, what's the drawback? Well, for one, until 3078, no engine manufacturer mass-produced such devices. So prior to that, superchargers had to be constructed on site or purchased from, let's go with aftermarket manufacturers. The other drawback, well, remember that safety thing? Well, surpassing an engine's power is not without risk. There is a chance the supercharger injects too much protium, or increases the cycles too much, or, well, the list goes on. Should this happen, the supercharger will not only burn itself out, but also damage the fusion engine itself, and the unfortunate mech warrior will have to deal with all the consequences normally associated with a damaged fusion engine. Even worse, the chances of this happening increases steadily if you leave the supercharger active. Superchargers are not very large. A few circuit boards, additional shielding, a tank of protium, some piping. On the other hand, just like a fusion engine, the shielding is heavy, and the bigger the engine, the more shielding will be needed. Superchargers weigh in at 1/10 the engine's weight. Another restriction is that the supercharger must be connected directly to the engine. For standard engines, that means you absolutely must place the supercharger in the center torso. XL engines give you a little more choice since those engines are physically larger. Once manufacturers started producing official superchargers, an additional advantage was the quick introduction of the pod version for Omni-mechs. Something that simply would not have been possible back when the things were designed, built, and installed all by the techs in the mech shop. A decent option for its time, mostly because for a long time it was your only real option. However, the quest for speed continued, and the SLDF was not much on non-standard parts and unsanctioned modifications to their machines. A better and more corporate-friendly solution was needed. The scientists of the Terran hegemony would present their own solution to the problem with the Myomer accelerator signal circuitry, or M.A.S.C. By 2740, M.A.S.C. had entered mass production and was beginning to appear on SLDF units. M.A.S.C. worked on principles completely different than that of the supercharger. M.A.S.C. uses complex computer code as well as its own onboard power supply to juice standard Myomer, drastically increasing its power and cycle speed. The result is a mech that can run at twice its normal walk rather than the 50% faster as it's normally possible. It should be noted that all this extra speed is the result of the M.A.S.C. system overtaxing Myomer and actuators only rather than the entire motive system. This has some advantages over the supercharger. First, there is virtually no risk to the engine. When a M.A.S.C. system mucks up, the failure point are the mech's leg actuators, not the engine. This has some obvious advantages, mainly that a blown actuator is much cheaper and easier to fix than a damaged fusion engine. Also, the system itself is not destroyed like with a supercharger. A M.A.S.C. system's weight and size depends on the mech's total tonnage. The system weighs 5% of the mech's mass and takes up as many critical spots. Since this system is self-contained, it can be located pretty much anywhere. In the 26 years between the widespread introduction and the beginning of the first shots of the Great War, M.A.S.C was not rare, but let's go with uncommon. Like much rare and advanced technology, the Secession Wars was not kind to M.A.S.C. It was not long before the only examples were locked away in Comstar vaults or being tinkered with by newly minted clan warriors, scientists, and technician cast members. The idea was not forgotten, though, and while advanced, M.A.S.C systems were somewhat simpler than those of weapons. The Capellans would succeed in reviving the technology in 3035, entering mass production not long after. The clans, of course, never lost the technology. They improved the basics, managing to decrease its size and weights, but were unable to improve its performance, reduce its risk, or adapt it to omnipod technology. Their M.A.S.C systems are slightly smaller and lighter. While the Capellans' research into M.A.S.C was proceeding, the Federated Suns were working on a project of their own. The decline in technology and general primitive and barbaric conditions of the Secession Wars had seen mechs using physical attacks with more and more frequency. While the advanced weapons of the SLDF had made reaching melee range nearly impossible, the small-scale engagements and less efficient weapon systems made, bashing mechs into pieces more and more common. The Federated Suns were developing a new kind of Myomer. While larger than typical Myomer, this improved Myomer was much stronger, almost 4 times as strong, doubling mech's lifting capacity as well as the power behind its physical attacks, but it had a problem. This prototype TSM was found to react, let's go with unfavorably when exposed to certain exotic gases. The FedSun engineers ended up writing the technology off as unworkable and giving up. It would have ended there if not for covert operations. You see, the Federated Suns knew the Capellans were desperate to keep up with their research projects. And after dumping huge sums of cash into the improved Myomer project, they wanted some kind of return on that investment. So they leaked the formula to the Capellans along with indications that this new Myomer was so revolutionary it would be the new FedSun standard going forward. With a few simple tests, the Capellans could indeed see the greatly improved strength of the Myomer was real. They could also see an upcoming problem. This improved Myomer would soon be paired with the new Hatchet Man battle mech. The Capellans panicked and placed the new Myomer into immediate production, prioritizing their cyan-based House Amara warriors. In the haste, they never thought to test it against certain gases. Very long story short, the Federated Suns raided the Capellan capital, flooding the zone with the gas, leading to any breach in the Capellan mech's armor, letting the gas in, and, you get the idea. The Federated Suns had turned the situation around, using a dud weapon and turning it into perhaps the galaxy's biggest troll move. Or so they thought. FedSun's research continued, and while their engineers had more or less solved the problems, the Federated Commonwealth was reluctant to put their new formula into mass production, testing and retesting, trying to ensure to themselves no one would be able to do to them what they had done to the Capellans. Meanwhile, the Liao research into M.A.S.C had given them an understanding of Myomer the Federated Suns were unaware of. Capellan engineers made changes to the formula, tweaking it and finally settling in on a compromise. the Capellans began to mass produce this new TSM formula. Triple-strength Myomer would see widespread availability just in time for the clan invasion of 3050. This new formula had some drawbacks. It was heat sensitive and could not reach its full capacity until reaching moderate heat. Prior to building up 9 heat, TSM functions as standard Myomer. But after heating up, it can double a mech's strength, therefore physical attack damage. Unlike its predecessor, it is now 99% explosion-free when exposed to that pesky gas. Further, the increased strength and flexibility of the TSM allows a mech to move faster than it would otherwise be able to. TSM-activated mechs add units to their base speed, seeing a likewise increase to their run speed. TSM's weight is more or less the same as standard Myomer, but is significantly bulkier. Any mech equipped with TSM is going to lose 6 criticals worth of equipment space. Unlike M.A.S.C or Superchargers, TSM has no real drawbacks, aside from the heat requirement. TSM can't spectacularly fail. The clans have been reluctant to research TSM technology. Their honor system frowns on physical attacks, and their Star League worship makes them very reluctant to acknowledge technology developed solely by the great houses during their absence. Still, well, they would change their mind. And, okay, again I will come out and say it. I don't think the clans completely turned their noses up at TSM for all those decades. Something tells me the more radical of their members were playing around with this stuff well before the 3135 Jadehawk. Conspiracies aside, triple-strength Myomer is one of few, if only times, Succession War tech matched or exceeded Star League eggheads. Well, that is it. Some technology used to increase the mobility of mechs. Speed can be king, and... what? Oh yeah. Turbo superchargers. I said I would get back to that. Okay, so here's the deal. Superchargers, TSM, and M.A.S.C use very different technologies to accomplish these speed boosts. So, of course, people have tried to mix and match the technology. Now, TSM and M.A.S.C is simple. They operate on very different principles, and to date, no one has succeeded in getting them to play nice together. However, the simplicity of superchargers does lead well to working with either technology. Artificially increasing an engine's effective rating does not directly interfere with TSM or M.A.S.C operations. This means a mech with a supercharger and M.A.S.C engaged is a sight to behold. Really, no matter what, because if it works, man, that's a quick mech. And if it fails, well, as long as you aren't the pilot, you got something to laugh about anyway. Anyone who has ever faced a Jadehawk can attest to what happens when a heavy or assault mech runs at medium or recon mech speed, followed up by a nasty physical. Man, it can get messy. At any rate, I hope you have enjoyed this look at attempts to make mechs move faster over land. I have to say I would stick with TSM if I were you. M.A.S.C is nice, but it can rip up a mech's legs. Don't even get me started on blowing a fusion engine's heat shielding trying to kick in a supercharger. Still, in those dark days, well, I can respect having the choice of a supercharger over, well, nothing. What do you think about the supercharger, M.A.S.C and TSM? With technologies like these, I am sure there are some crazy stories out there. If you would like to see a weapon or piece of technology covered, let me know below, and as always, I hope you enjoy the battle reps that are to come. Hello, this is Adam with Dream Made Productions. Thank you for watching my content. It really means a lot that you have given me the chance to entertain you. If you would like to support the channel, please visit my Patreon at patreon.com/DreamMadeProductions, linked below. Also below is a link for PayPal, or links if you would like to send crypto, if that's more your thing. Please know any amount that you give will be cherished and used to upgrade equipment and improve the channel. You can also help the channel by subscribing, turning on notifications, liking, commenting, and sharing my channel with anyone you think might be interested. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you enjoy the battle reps that are to come.